The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD TV. Happy Monday. It is the 24th of August, and we have a fantastic show lined up for you today. We're going to start off by looking at a new study that's just been released on gestational hypertension and what the findings mean for mamas and their babies. I'm going to just go over the study with you, and then we're going to be hearing from Midwife Sam Hypes, who I chatted with last week about all of the stuff going on there. Then I'm going to be chatting with Zoey O'Toole about a new book examining the possible connection between Tylenol and autism. And then we're going to be handing over to Polly Tommy, who is going to be chatting with Dean Allison and Shawn Buckley from the Allison Inquiry. And then we are going to be hearing from Helmut Sterz about his book, The Vaccine Mafia. So we have a lot to get through today. So let's begin with that new study on gestational hypertension. So a new report, this is from the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, has actually revealed a very big rise in gestational hypertension across the US. And this was pretty alarming to me when I saw it, so I thought I have to share. In 2016, gestational hypertension was just documented in 6% of mothers giving birth across the US. In 2024, that had actually risen to 10.4%, which is a 73% increase in just 8 years. This is very significant. In other words, basically, 1 in every 10 mums giving birth in America was diagnosed with gestational hypertension in 2024. Now, rates actually rose in every single age group, every BMI category, every major racial and ethnic group, and across all 50 states and in Washington, D.C. So it definitely makes you, raise some questions. What is happening across America that women are being diagnosed with gestational hypertension more and more? So I decided to bring an expert on, and a few weeks ago, I sat down with the fantastic midwife, Sam Hypes, and we had a deeper conversation about hypertension during pregnancy. What is it? What does it mean for mums? What should we be watching out for? And how can we help prevent it? Let's check it out. Good morning, CHD TV. Welcome to our Mothers to Be segment. My name's Bella Yon, and we chat all things from preconception to pregnancy, birth, and beyond here at our Mothers to Be segment. And today I'm going to be joined by Sam Hypes. She's a traditional midwife, and we are covering a topic that many of you have actually written into us to ask to be covered, and that's hypertension and preeclampsia in pregnancy. So welcome, Sam. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello. So glad to be here.
Amazing. So why don't you just kick us off by introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about the work you do?
Yeah, so my name's Sam. I'm a traditional midwife here in Kentucky, and I struggled with hypertension during my first pregnancy, so that really led me to go down that rabbit hole and become a midwife. And I had a beautiful home birth with my second baby, and I did not experience the same challenges that I did the first time, so it really solidified my trust in natural healing and midwifery. And so that's how I got my start into learning all about the blood pressure stuff and birth at home.
I love it. So why don't we just start by asking, what even is hypertension?
So the guidelines for hypertension are largely defined by legislation and by, the medical system. So that trickles down into midwifery now as well. And generally speaking, if your blood pressure is consistently 140/90 or above, that would risk you out of home birth midwifery care. If you're with a hospital provider, that would be the definition for hypertension as well. And, they would continue your care in that setting.
Okay, and what about preeclampsia? Is that the same as hypertension, or is there a difference between them?
Yeah, so they can go along together. Often they say that if you have hypertension, it can put you at risk for developing preeclampsia, but they are not the same thing. Some people present only with hypertension, and other people present with hypertension and they also develop preeclampsia. So just one high blood pressure reading should not give you the label of hypertension or preeclampsia. It needs to be multiple readings, spaced out. And for preeclampsia, that's defined by also having either some physical symptoms or other clinical indications other than just blood pressure.
Okay. And how common is either hypertension or preeclampsia, both, I guess? How common is it, and who is most at risk of getting these things?
Yeah, it used to be much more rare than it is now. I feel like we're seeing a lot more cases of hypertension and preeclampsia. When I ask older midwives, they maybe had 1 or 2 cases their entire career. And now, you hear it a lot more from friends and family and other people in your community who have developed preeclampsia or hypertension. We're seeing quite a rise in the numbers.
Interesting. Do we know why? Do we know what causes it?
The medical system says it's random. I don't know if I agree with that. Sometimes there are cases where it just cannot be prevented. But mostly the elder midwives, they knew how to prevent complications of pregnancy through diet and lifestyle. And so I think their statistics were just better overall from this handed down wisdom of knowing how to prevent preeclampsia.
Yeah. So let's chat about prevention. I think that's probably what everyone is wanting to know. How do we stop this from happening to us? How do we prevent, getting hypertension or preeclampsia in pregnancy?
Yeah, and the more we look into it, it really starts before you even become pregnant, looking at your diet and your health history and, a number of factors. But the more research that comes out, it shows that some of your vitamin levels pre-pregnancy can predispose you to having preeclampsia. I think one of them's B12, vitamin D. There are several others. So for a lot of people, I think Brewer's Diet is a great framework for just getting a whole foods diet in general if you're planning on having a baby. That can really set you up for success and hopefully not deal with some of those complications.
Yeah, and let's chat Brewer's Diet. Some pregnant mamas may have heard of it. I know I learned about it during pregnancy, but are you able to run us through what it is, who found it, and why does it help?
Yeah, so I feel like just like with anything, a lot of times when midwives or women are saying things, people don't listen. So if you have a doctor behind your name, though, maybe they will listen to you. So that's the case with Dr. Brewer. Probably he learned a lot of his information from traditional midwives, but he is the most well-researched, and even, most westernized people would consider Brewer to be out there and a crazy person who thinks that you can prevent illnesses naturally. But he did a lot of research back in the 80s based on giving women certain types of diets and seeing if they were able to prevent preeclampsia, things like IUGR, which is a small for gestational age baby, and, what about twin pregnancy and a number of different complications. And he found that eating whole foods was the ticket. Having enough calories, having enough whole foods that include protein and salt. So if you look at pretty much any animal, like if you're into farming and you raise animals, the first thing most people do, even if they're grass-fed animals, will put out a salt block or a mineral block. And so that was one of the founding pieces for Dr. Brewer, was making sure that women are getting plenty of high quality sea salts along with enough calories, because, the Western model says, eat your normal diet and add a prenatal and 200 calories. Well, that's just not enough for some women. And it depends, what if you have a stressful job? What if you're caring for kids other than the one you have right now? Say you have 3 or 4 other children, or you're moving during pregnancy, or you have a male baby, that is going to increase your nutrient requirements. So we also accounted for things like that, to include more calories in the diet to hopefully prevent some of these illnesses. And with preeclampsia specifically, his theory was that there are these lakes that fill with blood behind the placenta. And when the lakes are full, everything's flowing perfectly. Baby's getting plenty of nutrients. But when there's not enough blood volume, those lakes start to dry up, and the heart pumps harder to get more blood to those lakes to feed the baby. And so that is where you see that rise in blood pressure when there's not enough blood pumping to those placental lakes.
Wow, makes sense. Where can women learn more about, what foods to eat and like how to follow the Brewer's diet? Is there a location that kind of houses this information?
Yes, there's a very old school website I
Okay.
love. I don't think it's changed since Dr. Brewer helped set it up, or I don't know who took over after, but it's very old school and very simple. And that's what I like about Brewer's diet too, is that it is very simple foods. Like, it's almost boring because it's just basic whole foods and kind of like checking them off the list and making sure you get each one of them. And those categories that he has include like eating at least 2 eggs a day, getting plenty of protein. You can choose from like 6 to 8 different types of protein, and then veggies and some whole grains as well.
Nice. Sounds good. And I know you mentioned salt. So
Yes.
let's chat about that, because I feel like most women, especially if they're in the kind of conventional hospital setting, they would probably be told to reduce salt intake if their blood pressure is high.
Yes, and what do they see most often? What do they see most often when they recommend that? It gets worse and worse, and then you have someone who's needing to be induced super early, or they have severe complications, and you just don't see that as much in the home birth midwifery model because we're encouraging women to get plenty of salt. The minerals are super important for making sure that the body is being fueled adequately. So restricting the salt is really restricting your overall mineral content.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, for people watching, in case it isn't clear, I think in a conventional hospital setting, what they also fail to do is distinguish between types of salt. Are you getting salt from McDonald's French fries and using a processed table salt, or are you using a mineral-rich, high-quality sea salt? And of course, we are advocating for the good sea salt, not the processed.
Yes. And that was a key thing. Processed foods are really not great for pregnancy. They can affect more than just your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your overall health status. The problem with Western foods is they are high calorie, low nutrient value. And you see that with things like iodinized salt. It has some calories, but it lacks the nutritional value. So what you end up with is super healthy people who avoid all of the junk food. Sometimes they can end up restricting calories, not meaning to, just because they're trying to avoid all this Western food. And then you have the other side of the spectrum with people who tend to be slightly overweight, who are indulging in high calorie foods that actually have low nutritional value. So you can have someone that looks like they have an expanded blood volume, but if you actually look at their blood work, it shows that they appear somewhat malnourished, even though they're eating adequately.
Yeah, so interesting. So just to confirm, or maybe this is not it, do you follow this diet when you already have hypertension, or just to prevent, or is there something different you should be doing if you are actually diagnosed with hypertension during pregnancy to reverse it, if it can be reversed?
So if people don't have hypertension, I usually recommend following the Weston A. Price dietary recommendations for pregnancy, because they're very similar, but they're not as geared towards complications. And if someone has a history of hypertension or preeclampsia in a previous pregnancy, then I would recommend doing the Brewer's diet. And there is an emergency protocol for Brewer's diet, which is pretty hefty. It's like 17 eggs a day and a quart of milk and an entire rotisserie chicken. But that is meant to kind of like try to play catch up really quickly and try to get more nutrients into the body and get your body to make more blood so that it's no longer restricted in like a shorter amount of time.
Okay, awesome. And then, if you are diagnosed with hypertension, can you have a home birth, or does it always warrant having to be transferred to a hospital setting?
Well, this is the tricky thing because so much of even midwifery practice has been co-opted by the medical system. You know, with the formation of the AMA, the American Medical Association, that led the way for all of the different professions to be licensed. And so a lot of what women are dealing with is licensure and the regulations around blood pressure. So if you hire a licensed midwife and she has to follow the rule of 140/90, then you may not be able to have a home birth. And so that was a big concern when I was looking at having my next baby. I didn't want to be risked out of care for that. So sometimes it can be really tricky to find a provider that's willing to kind of like stick their neck out for you and be willing to like work on nutrition and include all the natural supplements and things that can help. And, you know, there are significant risks that we don't want to downplay, but often these things can be avoided with adequate care, but sometimes it can be hard to find.
Yeah, thank you. And so you kind of did mention risk. Are there any symptoms that mamas should be looking out for that you would say do warrant like immediate medical attention if this is something that they're dealing with? And what should they be looking out for?
Yes, for sure. Most women, you know, there are different types, and I think there's still research to be done on the different types. Some symptoms happen rapidly and come on very quickly, and to me, that would be someone who looks different, you know, like night and day different between a day or two. Like you saw them yesterday and you see them today, and just something seems off. Like they look really puffy or they don't look like themselves. They're not feeling well. That would be concerning. Usually there's more of like a steady rise, like the body is like starting to compensate. And a lot of times we can catch it in that compensation mode and try to do some things to prevent it, you know, picking up and getting worse. So typically women would have that rise in blood pressure happening over, you know, weeks or months. You know, it might start out where it's just 130/80 at one visit, and then it's back down, but it goes up the next day. And it can kind of teeter on those borderline numbers for a little bit before it gets severe. And in that case, you can, you know, do all the things to try to stay healthy and well and wait for labor. Most of the time, they are going to recommend induction. The standard of care is to recommend induction by 37 weeks for people who have uncontrolled hypertension and or preeclampsia. So that's what's most likely going to be recommended to people. But I would say women that are symptomatic, they're going to know. Like they're going to really not feel well, have headaches, have blurry vision, and just appear not their usual selves.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And so we chatted about the diet, and I'm guessing in that case they would maybe go for the emergency dietary protocol. Is there any other like lifestyle tips or anything that people can do to assist with hypertension during pregnancy other than the diet?
Yeah, I feel like the other big one is sleep. Prioritizing rest because your blood pressure drops while you're sleeping. And a lot of times sleep can be interrupted in pregnancy. Some people struggle with like their airway being more obstructed. So, you know, you can do things like the dilators for opening your nasal airways. You can help with sleep overall with magnesium or other herbal supplements. But sleep is really key. And I've had wonderful women that I've gotten to work with that have just showed me all the ways to prevent experiencing preeclampsia. And I can remember when she was very religious about how much she slept, and she prioritized taking a nap every day with her toddlers and going to bed early so that she could get adequate rest. And then balancing that with daily activities like walking, Pilates, things like that are going to get the blood flowing and moving, because you don't want stagnation either. You kind of want adequate rest, adequate nutrition, and then also some activity to keep things moving.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I did want to briefly chat about post-birth. I've heard that you can also get preeclampsia after you've given birth. Is this true? And if so, what should we be looking for postpartum that may kind of raise the alarm? Like, okay, I might have
so if you've had blood pressure issues, you probably should continue to monitor your blood pressure postpartum. That's going to be one of those key indicators to look for. And then the same symptoms that you would experience prenatally, like the swelling or the headaches that don't go away, blurry vision. But I do think that the postpartum preeclampsia, sometimes it occurs because we've kind of, the Western model used to say just like get the baby out and that will cure the preeclampsia. And most of the time that does work, but occasionally it doesn't. And I think that's where it comes back to Brewer's philosophy. The body's been compensating. So sometimes taking that baby out does help the body have to compensate less, but sometimes it's like it's already set up to be compensating, and maybe even after the baby your body just like still hasn't caught up with all the nutritional needs of the pregnancy and the baby.
Yeah, wow, makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom. Is there anything else you want to cover in regards to hypertension or preeclampsia, or have we got it all?
The other key point is sometimes people will try to replace some of their calories or their nutritional needs with supplements. And excuse me, some supplements are so good and others are not as good. It's really important to not supplement your protein with protein powders and also with greens and other things like that. You really want to get your nutrition from whole foods. And Brewer specifically, he found that using supplements rather than whole foods to try to compensate created worse outcomes. So that the philosophy is that you're really trying to get all of your nutrients from your food because it has the balance of, the fiber, the probiotics, the minerals. They're all balanced and whole in there. Whereas if you just take the pure protein or whatever you're needing to add in, and eat the same, the outcomes were not as good.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense to me. I think people forget that even healthy processed food is still processed food, right? So in order to get a protein powder, it's had to undergo some sort of processing in order to get protein in like a powder form with chocolate flavor or whatever you put in. So I totally agree with you. Whole foods are always the way. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. It was so lovely meeting with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do always end the segment with one question, and that's if you could share any piece of advice with an expecting or a new mama. It can be related to this topic or anything, honestly. What would it be?
I would say to take your nutrition and your self-care very seriously and to prioritize, doing all the things that make you feel healthy and well all throughout pregnancy, before and after.
I love it. I love it. And where can people learn more about you or connect with you, or maybe they can use you as a midwife if they're in your local area? How can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at the Home Birth Ministry, and I also have a website, thehomebirthministry.org.
Fantastic. Sam, thank you so much. You've been amazing, and I've learned so much. I'm sure others have. And hopefully she answered all your questions, guys, that you sent in. If not, reach out and we will get them covered. But thank you so much again, Sam, for joining us. And thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next week.
All right, welcome back. Hopefully you guys found that as insightful as I did. I think with the study that we just chatted about and then also speaking with Sam, it's just definitely something to be mindful and proactive about with our diet and our lifestyle. If you guys have any questions, you can message us at Mothers to Be on Instagram or social media and we will help you find some great resources. And now we are going to shift gears and talk about another issue that's receiving a great deal of attention and is definitely relevant to young mamas and young people. It's Tylenol and its relationship with autism. So I'm joined today by the fantastic Zoey O'Toole, who is part of our Children's Health Defence team here, and she's going to be chatting with us about a new book examining this subject. So hi Zoey, welcome.
Hi Bella, it is really great to be here. I just wanted to say I loved watching the interview you just did, and I think you're doing something wonderful here by helping people get ready for having children and doing it healthily. And I also wanted to mention, based on that interview, that one of the clues to why it's increasing could be the folic acid. She
Interesting.
mentioned B12, right? And B12 is often low in people who have the MTHFR issues, and they react badly to the folic acid.
Sure.
So if they're being supplemented with folic acid and they're not getting methylated Bs, that might be one of the issues.
Yeah. Really great point. And actually, Zoe, we're going to cover this hopefully in the next few weeks, but also the synthetic folic acid being added to our food. So that might go hand in hand with people eating,
So if
processed
they're getting more in
foods.
the as well, yes.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for bringing that point up. Let's chat about this new book. Can you tell us, the title of it, who wrote it, what's it about? What do we need to know?
The title is Tylenol and Autism, Evidence, Scientific Blunders, and Medicine Gone Wrong. And that is exactly what it's about. Now, the reason why we put this book out was because we've known the science is conclusive on this. Before you said the possible connection between Tylenol and autism, it's not possible. It is absolutely definitive. And the science is there in all the you've probably heard of what's it called? The Bradford Hill criteria for causation. There are different ways of looking at things scientifically to determine whether something is actually causing something. And in this case, basically all the Bradford Hill criteria are fulfilled. Tylenol is causing autism. The question is only how much and how it's doing it. So we commissioned William Parker, who is a researcher who's been looking into this topic for more than a decade, to write this book because it is one of the easiest ways to reduce autism risk right out of the bat. Do not give infants Tylenol or acetaminophen in any form. And the reason why is because they do not have a pathway that can safely metabolize the drug. Now, veterinarians know that cats cannot have Tylenol, and that's because they don't have the same metabolic pathway. What happens is when their children are fed this drug, they have it metabolized to a toxic metabolite called NAPQI. And this thing is always toxic to children, always. So there is no time when a child is going to get this, that it's not going to be a bad thing for them. Now, a lot of children have enough glutathione that they can take care of it without having too much damage. But as we've found in the autism community in particular, glutathione tends to be low. And when glutathione is low, Tylenol depletes the glutathione too. With the oxidative stress is very much a part of the kids who get hurt the most. So what we find is that all the kids are going to be affected in some way, but some kids are going to be affected more. And the kids who are affected more are the ones who end up having autism, having ADHD, having all the other things that are on the rise.
Wow, gosh, such important information for mums to know who are probably not told this. What about pregnancy? Does the book touch on that at all?
It does. And one of the reasons why it does is because during the press conference with President Trump and Secretary Kennedy, they talked more about the pregnancy period. And unfortunately, the pregnancy period is not the worst risk window. There is some risk if a woman is taking a lot of Tylenol, then it is going to affect the developing fetus. However, when the woman is taking the Tylenol, they are usually better able to handle the intake of Tylenol than a child is. So that it turns out that the worst window is at childbirth. So unfortunately, a lot of hospitals have Tylenol automatically added to pain relief when you're in labor. And that is terrible because the newborn cannot process it. So there is a very high correlation between women who got lots of Tylenol at birth and later development of autism. So that is one thing that you can say no acetaminophen at birth, and better if you're doing a home birth because you're not likely to get it then. So that's another plug for home birth.
Yeah.
But But yeah, so you want to avoid it particularly around birth. And then anytime in infancy, certainly. And you cannot count on your child having developed this metabolic pathway until they're 6 years old. So it's better to avoid it until 6 years old. Now, one of the things people are going to say is, well, then how do I deal with the fever that happens when my child gets a vaccine? Well, as the author of the book points out, you might want to reconsider putting your child in that state repeatedly as an infant, that the only way you can think of to deal with it is with this toxic drug.
Wow. So good. Thank you, Zoey. This is so insightful. So where can people buy this book? I mean, I'm for sure I'm ready to read it and learn all the things.
We have, so we do have our CHD store, but we are in the process of converting over, so we can't actually sell it to you directly right at the moment. So, so you're going to have to go elsewhere than our website. And the best way is to, well, one way anyway, is to go to Amazon, but it's also available on other booksellers like Barnes & Noble and independent outlets.
Fantastic. Zoey, thank you. This has been so eye-opening.
I think
so important.
every parent-to-be should read this book.
Yes, love it. Okay, hear that, guys. Go and grab a copy now. I know I will be. Thank you so much, Zoey. Now we are going to hand over to Polly Tommy and the Allison inquiry.
Good morning, everybody. Well, that was fascinating. I know Zoey mentioned the V word, the vaccine word. Mother to mother, please do not vaccinate your children. Not necessarily views of children's health defence, but had to put that one in. All right. What's the Allison inquiry? Let's find out. Let's bring on our guests, Shawn Buckley and Dean Allison. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Paula.
Well, so first question is, what our viewers are going to know, what even is it?
Well, yeah, why don't I start? You can maybe add in. Listen, there hadn't been, as a member of parliament, a couple of things we do. We listen to people, we help advocate on behalf of government programs. And, I heard the stories during COVID of people being forced to either lose their job or take the shot. And they, had major issues. Let's, not fast forward, just go back, go a little bit after that. And I had these people reaching out to my offices talking about injury. So it's been on my heart for a number of years to try and do something. We've had zero inquiries on this issue in Canada. And I thought it is absolutely ridiculous that there are a number of countries around the world, 30, OECD, G7 countries, of course, the US under Senator Johnson has been doing many meetings on this, that we haven't even had a conversation. And so I thought at the very least, given limited resources, I thought what would make some sense is if we could at least listen to what people had to say, give them a voice, and maybe try and get this conversation going again. And the second thing is to go to bat for them around the various government programs that actually they have not been able to access because it's been just brutal. And I had a chance to run into Shawn and his wife in my office back in October, and we just had a quick conversation about this. He was in seeing me about something else. And I thought, is there a possibility that maybe we could work together on something like this? That's how it got started. Shawn, I don't know what your views were.
Yeah, no, well, similar. And just, Polly, for the American audience, so we don't have congressmen, we have members of parliament. We do have senators, but they're not elected. So really it's the members of parliament that, are the key players in our government. And really what has to happen here is we need to have a conversation. So before any decision was made to press ahead with this, we were meeting with MPs to see if it'd even be possible that they would be willing to sit in a committee room on a panel and listen to vaccine injured persons. Like we were trying to figure out if this was politically possible. And Polly, I learned something shocking because I live in a COVID bubble, as you will in most children health defense audience. If you say PCR test or anything like that, we know what's being talked about in the COVID world. But most of our members of parliament, and I wonder if most congressmen and senators are in this category, actually believe that the injuries around them are caused by long COVID, because you can't hide the fact that a large part of the population is injured in both countries. but they believe it's long COVID, and they believe that the COVID-19 vaccines worked. And if you believe that the vaccines worked and that the injuries around us are long COVID, then ethically, you are against anything that we would call anti-vax, right? Anything that would create vaccine hesitancy. And I had to come to realize, no, this is a real belief, and it's a belief held by people in power. And it's a belief held in people, by people in power because of the mainstream media messaging is so effective. So what is happening with this inquiry is, because it's even occurring, the issue of vaccine hesitancy has exploded into that group of population that believes that the vaccines work. Like, now the conversation's happening. There's disbelief, but it's happening. So I think the Allison inquiry is a conversation starter that needs to happen.
And while you were preparing for this, so, okay, let's just talk about it. September 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. There's that many. What are we to expect? We're going to be live streaming this on CHD TV, so just so everybody knows this. But what are we to expect for those days?
So by and large, we are calling vaccine-injured people, and I don't even want to call them vaccine-injured anymore. I want to call them vaccine victims, because I'm getting so traumatized by interviewing them. But we're calling them to tell their stories. Because in Canada, and I expect it's the same in the United States, they're really not allowed to speak. And they're even afraid to speak. They get gaslit by the medical community, they get mistreated, and they're absolutely desperate to speak. So the first thing that's happening is we're having them share their stories to members of Parliament. So, just substitute senators and congressmen that aren't aware of what's really been going on. And we know that when people share their stories, that it resonates with us. And then we're going to have a handful of experts just to help frame the issues.
And how's that affected you? You just said you listen to the stories. I mean, I know that, been doing that for years. What I find is they all say the same thing.
Well, here's the interesting thing, and Polly, I've probably under oath examined more vaccine-injured persons than any other person in the world. And you know that you prepare 10 for one that you call. But this time it's a little different. So just by way of example, we had a Zoom meeting with the team, I think it was 3 days ago, and the same thing happened when we had a team Zoom meeting about 2 months ago. I asked we've got 2 volunteers that are screening all these applications to rank them, to kind of funnel them down to a short list. And every time I ask how they're doing, one of them just starts weeping and weeps for the rest of the call. And there's just been a lot of weeping going on with all of us that are involved with these witnesses. The amount of suffering is unbelievable. We have one, Michael Ost, who's largely quadriplegic. Like, he's got a little bit of movement in arms, so he can move the joystick on his power wheelchair to move around. We don't have the funding to pay for travel. So he starts doing crowd funding, and he's going to be renting this little bus for wheelchairs. Well, he put out a notice to us saying, does anyone else in a wheelchair need a ride to Ottawa? And it turns out we had this other witness who, because of feeding tubes that have to be there 12 hours a day, has a big IV pole and was having trouble getting, because an ordinary wheelchair bus won't take you, right? So Mike is going to help this person. Like, how do you deal with that and not end up weeping, Polly?
I know. I mean, so this is Canada. Talk about, so in England, there was AstraZeneca and Moderna and Pfizer. Over here, we had Johnson & Johnson. What do you have? What vaccines are we dealing with? Let's not call them vaccines. What shots are you dealing with in Canada? What are you seeing the most of? Because let me just tell you this. When we were out on the road, Moderna, the most disgusting burning injuries we've ever seen. Pfizer, for sure, killed the most. And Johnson & Johnson, a lot of psychological problems going with that and deaths as well. What are you seeing in Canada?
Well, we're seeing, it's funny, like that initial Pfizer report of adverse reactions of special interest. I think there was 1,293. We're seeing a real broad spectrum. In Canada, we had all 4 of those vaccines, but Canada held the AstraZeneca one on the market probably longer than maybe every other Western nation. So other nations had pulled it, but we kept it on the market. So we're seeing a broad spectrum. The most widely used vaccine in Canada was Pfizer. So just because of numbers, we're seeing more injuries from Pfizer and Moderna than the other 2.
And death, you're talking about injuries on this conversation. Are we going to be talking about the people who were killed by these shots?
Yes, we're going to have witnesses coming and telling about people that we've lost.
And it's most important, Dean, why is it important that we keep talking about this? A lot of people say to me, can you stop covering COVID on CHD TV? It's sort of got kind of boring, but it's so important that we do not let this die, this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's part of the reason why we're doing this is that, as you're well aware, these people have been gaslit. Shawn mentioned it. You've talked about it. People feel like they haven't had permission to speak about this publicly. So why is it that as a member of parliament, I can hear these people's personal stories in my office, and yet publicly I'm not allowed to talk about it? And you think about even a number of these injured people, they've got issues and they feel they can't even talk about it with their family. I would feel great if we accomplished one thing. I'd like to accomplish many things, but if we could give people permission to talk about this publicly, there's no way that healing can begin. There's no way that people can get help. There's no way that they can share their stories and talk to somebody else that may have figured out something they weren't totally unaware of. If we keep these stories buried inside your home, inside a closet, and feeling embarrassed and gaslit to share these stories. So I would say that as a great first step, it would be great to be able to have this conversation come in the public, give people permission to speak publicly about it, and then see if we can begin the healing amongst family and friends and communities and all these things that's for so long. It's interesting as the whole world has moved on, but these people's lives have been changed forever. And once again, through no fault of their own, some did it because they thought they were trying to help the cause, as they were told. Other people were forced, literally with a gun to their head, saying, if you don't do this, you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to keep your job, and you certainly won't be able to see grandma in her nursing home. Now, I realize that many states had different levels of ability in terms of being able to travel. I would say, and Shawn, you can correct me on this, I would say we had some of the most restrictive rules around travel and work probably anywhere in the world right here in Canada.
Yeah, I think we all saw that. One more question for you, Dean. You're a member of parliament. You must be being attacked for this.
Oh yeah, no, I fully expected it, and we, it started with members of parliament from the other side. It's moving to some of their proxies right now. The people that are in the party, et cetera, et cetera. And they're saying, this guy's creating vaccine hesitancy. I don't know why we're talking about this. I'm saying, hey guys, your party, your government actually created a vaccine injury support program. You actually acknowledge that people were injured, although I think the numbers are completely lowballed. We have some 60,000 people injured, according to government public health records, with 11,000 very seriously. 3,500 people applied for this program. 3,000 were accepted. Only 252. Think about that. Only 252 out of 60,000 people, at 0.4%, have seen any type of compensation. So I find it rich, a little bit ironic, that anyone could say that we are trying to stir this up or create hesitancy. These people, every single one of them, one of the first things they say is, you know what, I'm not anti-vax. It's like, yeah, we know. You actually got the vaccine and you're injured. That's why we're having this conversation. So the amount of gaslighting that's happened is completely unacceptable. We got to figure out a way in society to have these tough questions. Because if we don't have these tough conversations, we're never going to find a cure. We're never going to find help. These people are going to continue to suffer in silence. And I think that's completely unacceptable.
And what do you both want the outcome to be? What happens after we stream this and you do this event? What happens afterwards? What's the perfect outcome for you?
Well, Polly, if I can speak, that's a difficult question. But if I can, one thing that's jumped out at us to just show how captured we are as a society is, so I'm interviewing these people. I'm I'm at the end of the funnel as I get to interview them and decide, are we going to call you as a witness or are we not? And, so I spoke about Michael Osh, who's a quadriplegic. I'm dealing with people whose lives are completely destroyed. They've lost their kidneys and they're 30 and they're waiting on the list and saying things like, well, but even if I get a transplant, I know I'm back on dialysis because it's only going to last 12 years, like if everything goes right, so to speak. And I have a question that they don't expect. And that is what's been the most difficult part of this? And I'm expecting it to be, I'm a quadriplegic. I've lost my career. I'm in chronic pain. I don't know how much longer I can take this. But almost without exception, the answer is well, actually, how I've been treated by the medical system. How, they're basically told it's in their head. How there's this complete inability or complete reluctance to accept vaccine injury. Even those people where the doctors right out of the gate said, this is vaccine injury. There's no question. Everyone agrees it's vaccine injury. They can't get treatment by specialists. They say, I've been referred to 30 specialists. Not a single one will treat me because the diagnosis is vaccine injury. Because doctors in Canada, and I suspect in the United States, will be disciplined if they speak out against this vaccine. And so they're even afraid to treat people, let alone acknowledge. Almost everyone that I'm interviewing says, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Well, what do you mean you're not an anti-vaxxer? Of course you're an anti-vaxxer, but they're so afraid of not getting treatment. They're so afraid of being, you're even worse than a leper. And so it just tells me how strong this spell is. We've been so conditioned that we cannot have a conversation about vaccines, especially the COVID vaccines, because none of us wants to be labeled as an anti-vaxxer. Well, I'd like to know, what the heck is a vaxxer? What is a vaxxer? If we're so afraid of being an anti-vaxxer, what's a vaxxer? I knew nothing about this before. I have 3 kids, they're all adults now, but when they were younger, they were getting, my oldest was getting all the vaccines as he was supposed to. And then my middle child, she hadn't entered the school system yet, so was getting vaccinated in the doctor's office and had an anaphylactic reaction and died and had to be revived. So the doctor said to us, well, you have to stop. You guys are susceptible as a family, so you have to stop getting vaccinated. So my youngest never did get vaccinated. But we were getting hounded by public health. It's like they'd park a car across the street almost. All hours of the day, you're getting called constantly. And then somebody told me the trick to reduce the calls. And what the person said was you just ask them, well, what vaccine do you want my child to get? Just send me the double-blind clinical trials, showing it's safe and effective. Well, the calls dropped by 90%. I didn't have actually the foresight or the intuition to actually ask, well, what does this mean? Because they weren't providing them, but I didn't connect the dots. Well, they don't exist. Now I know they don't exist. So is a vaxxer somebody that says it's okay to inject children or subject them to any medical treatment that has not gone through at least 2 double-blind clinical trials with a placebo? I'm in the drug approval world. For an adult, if we're going to get a drug approved, even for a small subset of adults, the bare minimum is 2 double-blind clinical trials placebo-controlled, or it's unethical to approve it for adults. So wouldn't that be the bare minimum for kids? Is that what a vaxxer is? Because I'd like to know. We can't even have the conversation. We can't be anti-vaxxers. Well, what's a vaxxer? Is that somebody who says it's okay without even meeting that minimal standard? It's just a good question, but I'm hoping that we're able to break through this where it's not a crime or a religious sin to question and have a conversation about vaccines.
And so let's just remind everybody when it is. So Lou, if you can put that back up on the screen, please. So it is the 8th, 9th, 10th and 11th of September 2026. You can apply still to be a witness. Is that correct? At AllisonInquiry.com. And I will be live streaming it as well. So stay tuned on your text alerts. Both of you, thank you so much for being so brave and doing the right thing and coming on this morning as well. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Polly.
All right, everybody, we'll keep you updated on that and remind you when we're streaming that live. We're going to go now live to Helmut Sterz. Good morning.
Good morning, Polly.
So you have a new book out. Is it out today or is it out tomorrow?
Tomorrow is birthday.
Tomorrow is the birthday. Okay, it's called The Vaccine Mafia. I think let's start with that. What's this book about and why have you called it The Vaccine Mafia? I do like that title, I have to be honest.
I have to say that I'm not talking only about the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry is just part of this mafia. And the list is long of those who participate in this mafia. And it's well organized, can be seen as a pyramidal structure or as a web. I put in the center international organizations such as the WHO, the UN, the tech giants, Soros, Musk, all the foundations, starting with Gates, Gavi, CEPI, Wellcome, and so on, foundations that earn a lot of money with vaccinations. Then comes the governments, who very much support this structure. The health institutions, I could name Dr. Fauci, the NIAID, and others. The Epstein connection, we don't yet have full transparency about the connections that belong to that. Then the military and intelligence agencies, the Department of Defense, DARPA, NSA, NSC, signature retention, CIA, FBI, gain-of-function research. There I would name Ralph Barrick and many others. Every laboratory that is working with new vaccines based on this technology, they are belonging to gain-of-function. And finally, the pharmaceutical industry, and I wouldn't say that Mr. Borla is the only one. Investors, all the big investors such as BlackRock, Rockefeller, and the others, they belong and they support. They are earning a lot of money with with vaccination, and so for me they belong to the mafia. And there is also the media and universities that perform research in this area, experts who support, medical organizations. So you have a bunch of participants in this mafia. It's not just a little organization, and it's not just the pharmaceutical industry. It's a big system that profits from vaccination.
I would say an evil system. How long did it take you to write this book, and why did you not come out with it sooner? We needed this book a lot sooner.
Yes, good question. Many people ask this. I have not started in December 25 to bring this book in German out to the market. From the very beginning in 2020, I was wondering what is going on here. And I started writing reports for the family and friends and colleagues, for instance, about the masks. And then I wrote quite a few documentations when we saw the side effects. And I described that this was going on like a tsunami. More and more side effects appeared, and each time when I got news, I distributed my pamphlets to my family and friends and so on. But there was not much response. The people said, "Oh yes, you're an anti-vaxxer, so please leave us alone. This is a very dramatic situation, and we have to get vaccinated." So in 2023, I decided to write a book because with my little documentations, I could just not get through to sufficiently many people. And so I started writing this book. I got help from a couple of people, and I found an editorial house with Rubicon in Germany who produced this book, and I went through many settings with a lady who wrote the book and who really put it in the right text. So it came out end of 2025. But I have done a lot of work before. And my interest is not only to publish this in German, I have published it in February in France, and now it will go to the United States. But in France, for instance, the situation is even worse than in Germany because the people are very reluctant to listen to people like me. And the story here is about Professor Raoult and Perrone, who lost their jobs and so on, such as in the United States with Peter and McCullough. They were just not invited anymore to TV shows, and the French are not interested. Most of the people say, well, it's behind us, let's forget about it. I don't want to hear any more about it. And this is a big error because, as we all know, this technology provides now many, many new compounds based on the same defective technology that shall be given to the whole world through the help of WHO for all sorts of diseases. So this is the technology that will be provided to everybody. And if the contract between WHO and the countries will be successful, then we will be imposed. They will impose all these things on us, and that's why I write this book. I really want to warn the people not to believe that this is the solution, but that they stay back from getting vaccinated.
Helmut, what was it when you were doing all your research and writing this book? What are the most shocking discoveries that you discovered?
That was the moment when I saw the documents that Pfizer and BioNTech have proposed to the FDA for approval. I expected a couple of toxicology studies at least, but there was almost nothing. They have performed two little rat toxicology studies in order to evaluate the general toxicology. And interestingly, the first of these studies started in March 2020 in order to have the results ready for the start of the phase 1 in end of April. This study was not performed with a final clinical candidate, but with a variant number 8. This is obviously only a very minor difference with the final candidate, but it's different. But the final study for phase 1 or the ongoing development was started in July 2020, and the results were available in November. So this study was done in parallel to the clinical studies, and it couldn't have an influence on the clinical study. And these two were the only general toxicology studies, and the third study was a reproductive toxicology study, which was started in the middle of 2020, and the results were only available after launch of the compound. So this had no impact, for instance, on women, and there were about 20,000 women in the big study, and nobody could really be prepared for side effects. I mean, also in this big clinical study, that they saw an impact on the menstrual cycle, and well, there are books which describe that people with severe side effects were just excluded from the study. So we just do not know whether this study was really giving us sufficient information. However, the study that was mentioned 10 minutes ago, the overall summary of the first 2 months after launch, they showed a lot of impact on pregnancy. And among others, there were over 1,200 death cases. So one knew very quickly that there were things going on that have never been seen before, and nobody reacted. So my observation is that everybody closed the eyes, and especially the authorities are deeply involved in this mafia system. They should have never accepted to launch these compounds without sound toxicological research. And we have the proof from a German institution, which is similar to the CDC, the Robert Koch Institute. It has performed protocols of their meetings. And in April 2020, they decided that there were no experimental studies to go on, so no safety and efficacy studies before launch of the compound. And this, for me, is nothing but a human experiment. If you do not do the necessary animal experiments before you treat human beings, then this is something that we have gone through in the 40s and under Hitler. So this really is unacceptable, and this was for me really a turning point, and I was horrified by what I was seeing.
How did they get away with it? I mean, that's a big question. How did we all, well, I say we, how did so many fall for it? And will there be accountability? And will they try and do it again?
Yes, you know that in the United States, beginning of February 2020, DARPA said that there was a national security threat, despite the fact that there was not a real national security threat. And so the PrEP Act was put in action. This law, which gives the military a lot of possibilities. Everybody who produces and who researches on these compounds, everybody who acknowledges them, who accepts them for a launch, everybody who then distributes them, is out of liability responsibility. So there is a liability shield. And I can only explain to myself that under these conditions, the pharmaceutical industry said, nobody can do us any harm or attack us if we are just doing the minimum. And I have seen, and this is mostly work of Sasha Latipova, who has very much dug into this system. The Department of Defense has ordered from Pfizer the production of hundreds of millions of doses against this virus. But everything that was quality and safety was excluded. This was not included in the contract with Pfizer. And so Pfizer must have assumed that everything which was not in the contract had not absolutely to be done. And so they just did very poor little rat studies, and the reproductive toxicology study was also not done to the international standards, and this is really a scandal.
Helmut, where can we get your book? It's out tomorrow, everybody. And so I presume because our CHD store is not ready yet, you're going to say Amazon, right?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Where can people buy your book?
Yes, well, directly at Children's Health, I assume. And I'm not sure about the distribution system, but most probably Amazon will also distribute this book.
Yeah. I think everybody, it's going to be Amazon for now. Our bookstore is not quite ready, but Helmut, thank you so much for being on this morning and for doing all that work to educate us and the future generations. We truly appreciate you.
Polly, I thank you very much, and sorry for my poor English. I sometimes lack a couple of words, but I hope that it was understandable. And well, the story is not over, and my biggest hope is I would put that in three categories. The first one is to wake up the people, and in order to not get again in the same situation and accept vaccinations against something which is not real. That's the first point, because COVID is not over, and new diseases shall be treated by the same technology, and we should really oppose to that. The second one is we should put the names of the responsible persons of this mafia on the blackboard so that they can be put in front of a judge and take over their responsibility. And the third one, and very important one, is the victims must be helped. These people must be helped with all the costs that they have, and even if this will only be a drop on the hot stone, these people have lost their lives and the ease of their lives, and therefore it is important that responsible people get punished and that the judges accept that these victims are vaccine victims. And with these three ideas, I hope that this book helps a little bit.
Helmut, thank you so much for being on this morning. I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you, Polly, very much, and I hope to see you again.
Yes, you will be back on again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for being here with us again today. And you'll be with Michael Caine tomorrow morning.
The power we have is the truth.
This is the nation's leading conference.
It's so empowering to be joining together and working for our children.
Coming to CHD was the best decision that I've made probably all year.
It is a new day when senators and representatives want to associate themselves with Children's Health Defense. Why? We're telling the truth, and they know that. And because people are listening to us, and they know that.
To me, health on a political level is the most important subject. We need to raise a healthy generation.
We, the people, are waking up. We are taking back the system.
The federal government's job is not to ensure the stable legal risk for vaccine manufacturers.
Remember, we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I can't say it any better.
We can live to see a better day where people will be healthier and where government and corporations will be forced to be more responsible.
You can't be a decent human being and know what we have now come to learn and turn your back on it and close your eyes.
So, tell us your name, please.
My name is Jennifer.
Okay, Jennifer, tell us the story.
So I am here to warn people about the dangers of getting vaccinated either before pregnancy or during pregnancy. I consider myself a health food fanatic who knows everything about health. However, I didn't know about vaccines. A year before I was going to get pregnant, I told my OB/GYN at a visit that I was planning to get pregnant in about a year or so. And she said, okay, we need to test to see if you have antibodies for rubella. And I was negative. They did a blood test, and she said, you need the rubella vaccine. She didn't say you need the MMR vaccine, which is more notorious. And I didn't realize that I was probably getting the MMR vaccine because they don't give them separately in the States. And then after she gave me the vaccine, she said, don't get pregnant for 2 months because it's a live virus vaccine. And I wasn't worried because I wasn't going to get pregnant for another year. So that pregnancy, they tested my blood for rubella antibodies, which is what they do during the pregnancy. And I was positive, which I believe indicates that the vaccine was still in my system. My daughter was born with autism, which of course we didn't know as new parents right away, but there were early signs that my mother noticed, like lack of eye contact and fixation on objects instead of people.
Can I just ask a question? How old is she now?
She's 24 now.
She's 24, right? Okay, so you clearly didn't have any shots when you were pregnant, but she would have had either vitamin K, maybe even Hep B at birth.
So I checked her records, right? So I was going to a holistic pediatrician, but he didn't warn me about the possibility of the vitamin K and hepatitis B. This was 1999. So I don't know. I checked her records, though, from the hospital. I didn't see anything about hepatitis B, so I'm not sure.
But vitamin K?
Vitamin K, probably.
So that was the first poison that went into her. And so when your mother says tracking eyes and stuff, that doesn't happen until 6 weeks, tracking eyes. So what did she have at her? Did she have any other shots?
So because I was going to this wonderful holistic pediatrician, who I won't name, but he's been on CHD, he didn't want me to have any vaccines at all. And my mom, after I got pregnant, did tell me that she delayed my vaccines and she worried about them. And the best advice would be to do them slowly and delay them and do them one by one and not do the MMR. So that was my plan. So until 6 months, there were no vaccines. And then when I asked the pediatrician, okay, we want to do a vaccine, very, very reluctantly, he said, okay, you can do the meningitis, that's the least harmful. So we did that. And then at another visit, she got a polio. And that was it. We weren't really into vaccinating, and we knew the MMR was out of the question. My mom said, when should she get the MMR? And the doctor said, when she's 95 years old. So I never thought I would have a kid with autism because I knew about the MMR and I didn't do it, not realizing I had the MMR and that could have caused her autism. So she was finally diagnosed at the age of 2.5, and I think I didn't tell you that during my pregnancy I tested positive. Oh, I did tell you that okay. And I'm just going to fast forward. 3 years later, I had my second daughter, and during that pregnancy I tested negative for rubella, and she's neurotypical. So I think that's interesting, and I think that the vaccine got out of my system, thankfully. But there is research out there. Dr. Edward Yazbek, who has been interviewed by you guys, but he's no longer alive. But he had been involved with Children's Health Defense. He did research that did show a correlation between mothers getting the MMR and then having multiple children with disabilities. So I was lucky that I only had one with a disability and that it left my system, but it could have not gone that way.
Yeah, we do hear occasionally of women that had MMR when they were pregnant.
Right. So, when I actually emailed Dr. Yazbek at one point, and I said, I'm so thrilled with the research that you're doing, and he said, I've given up. Nobody wants to hear about it. So that was very sad because I was hoping I could somehow be part of the effort to get the story out. And then I tried to talk to my friends who had babies, and nobody wanted to hear anything about vaccines. So at a certain point, I decided I'd rather have friends than not, and I just stopped talking about it. So I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to tell my story, because I've been waiting about 22 years to do it. And I did write to my doctor, the OBGYN, who gave me the vaccine, and I told her what happened. And I said, I hope you are not doing this anymore. I hope you'll stop recommending this to women. And she wrote back, and she said, vaccines don't cause autism, and I'm absolutely going to keep doing this, because otherwise the women, if they get rubella when they're pregnant, could have a baby who's deaf. So I was not surprised, of course, but I felt good that at least I made my statement to her. So my story does have a happy conclusion at this point, at least, is that my daughter became very high functioning as a teenager. She lives independently, and she finally got her dream job, which was to be an assistant teacher at her elementary school. So her life is extremely fulfilled and happy. She does have autism, but I'd like to think that because she had so few vaccines when she was younger, that maybe that's why she's so high functioning and doing so well today.
Well, that's got a happy ending.
Yeah. But I just really want to warn anyone who knows a woman who ever wants to have a child, please tell them not to get vaccines, and especially not the MMR, and especially not any kind of live virus vaccine.
Yeah, I'd say none of them. Don't get any of them.
Yep.
That's not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defence. That's definitely the views of us. Okay, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
the story.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.